A poor girl interrupted a millionaire's lunch and told him something that saved his life. Snow fell silently on Fifth Avenue, coating Manhattan's most prestigious street in a deceptive blanket of pure white. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of LeBlanc, New York's most exclusive restaurant, James Kelly watched the flakes swirl with detached interest. His aged scotch, worth more than most people's weekly salary, sat untouched before him as he prepared to announce his company's latest billion-dollar acquisition. The sound of commotion at the restaurant's entrance drew his attention. A small figure in tattered clothes had slipped past the maitre d' girl, no more than 8, with frightened eyes and bluish lips, clutching a small box of gum. Melting snow dripped from her threadbare coat onto the imported marble floor, each drop a stark reminder of the world that existed beyond these gilded walls. "Please, sir," she whispered, approaching his table where other executives sat in $1,000 suits. "Would you like to buy some gum? My mother needs medicine." James Kelly, recently named Forbes Businessman of the Year, looked at the child with the same cold calculation he used to evaluate failing companies. With a sharp gesture to security, he spoke 4 words that would unknowingly change his life forever: remove this street trash. As the girl was dragged away, their eyes met for one brief moment. In that frozen second, something ancient and powerful passed between them, a connection neither could understand, but one that would soon shatter both their worlds. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The penthouse office on the 87th floor of Kelly Tower stood as a monument to one man's relentless pursuit of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike view of Manhattan, though their occupant rarely spared a glance at the city sprawling beneath him. At 45, James Kelly had everything money could buy, and nothing that truly mattered. The Thompson Heights acquisition papers, Mr. Kelly, his assistant, placed a thick folder on his mahogany desk. "And the board is waiting for your decision on the eviction timeline." James signed without reading. His signature, worth millions, flowed across the page with practiced indifference. Each stroke of his Mont Blanc pen would displace hundreds of families, but such thoughts hadn't troubled his conscience in years. "Schedule it for December 24th, he said, his voice carrying the sharp edge that had become his trademark. "Property values drop if we wait until after the holidays." "But sir, it's Christmas Eve." "Exactly. Media coverage will be minimal." He turned to his computer, dismissal clear in his posture. "That's all." Alone again, James's eyes drifted to the single personal item in his otherwise sterile office, a silver frame, face down on his desk. He hadn't looked at the photograph in years, but he didn't need to. The image was burned into his memory: Isabel, his wife, radiant in her hospital gown, cradling their newborn daughter, both dead within hours of the picture being taken, or so he'd been told. 20 years of ruthless business decisions could be traced back to that day. The young lawyer who'd once dreamed of changing the world had died alongside his family, replaced by a man who understood that emotion was weakness, and weakness was unforgivable in the world of high finance. His empire had been built on this philosophy. Kelly Development was known for acquiring struggling properties, evicting residents, and transforming neighborhoods into luxury developments. Critics called him a modern-day robber baron. Forbes called him a visionary. The Wall Street Journal praised his unsentimental approach to urban renewal. Mr. Kelly, his intercom buzzed. "Mr. Vager is here to see you." Scott Vager, his oldest friend, now chief financial officer of Kelly Development. They'd started together as junior lawyers, though Scott had always seemed content to remain in James's shadow. "Send him in." Scott entered, radiating nervous energy. "James, we need to discuss Thompson Heights. There's been complications." "What kind of complications?" "Local media's running stories about the residents. Single mothers, elderly veterans, children who'll have to change schools mid-year. The usual bleeding heart narratives." James's jaw tightened. Handle it. There's more. One of the residents, she's been asking questions about the past. About Isabel. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. James lifted the silver frame, finally looking at the photograph. Isabel's smile, frozen in time. The tiny bundle in her arms, face barely visible. The happiness that had slipped through his fingers. Who? A woman named Evelyn. She's raising a young daughter alone. Claims she has information about what really happened at the hospital that night. James replaced the frame, face down once more. Buy her off. Everyone has a price. She's refusing to meet. But her daughter Scott hesitated. She sells gum around the financial district. Small girl, about 8 years old. Something stirred in James's memory. A child in the restaurant, desperate eyes, blue lips from the cold. Find out everything about them, he ordered. And Scott? Keep this quiet. The last thing we need is someone digging into ancient history. After Scott left, James poured himself a scotch, watching snow begin to fall over the city. He'd buried the past deep, built his empire on its grave. Nothing could be allowed to threaten that. Not some poverty-stricken woman. Not a child selling gum. Not even the ghost of Isabel, whose eyes seemed to follow him from the face-down photograph, silently judging what he'd become. The intercom buzzed again. Sir? The contractors for Thompson Heights need your final approval on the demolition schedule. James took another sip of scotch, letting the familiar burn steel his resolve. Tell them to proceed as planned, and double the security presence for the evictions. I want it done quickly and quietly. Outside his window, the snow fell harder, coating the city in white. Somewhere out there, a mother and daughter were asking dangerous questions about the past. James Kelly had built his empire by burying such threats. This would be no different. But as night fell over Manhattan, the face-down photograph seemed to mock him, a silent witness to how far he'd fallen from the man he'd once hoped to be. In Thompson Heights, the January wind howled through cracks in old window frames, carrying with it the distant sound of demolition from neighboring blocks. Evelyn Martinez sat at their small kitchen table, carefully counting out pills from her nearly empty bottle of medication. One for morning, one for night. If she skipped every third day, they might last until her next paycheck. Mom, I made you tea. 8-year-old Emily placed a chipped mug beside her mother, steam rising in the cold air. Despite the worn second-hand clothes and shoes patched with duct tape, Emily carried herself with quiet dignity, a child forced to grow up too fast. Evelyn fought back a cough, not wanting her daughter to hear how it rattled in her chest. Thank you, my amor. Did you finish your homework? Emily nodded, pulling out a crumpled math test from her backpack. A red stood proudly at the top. Mrs. Peterson says I could skip a grade if she trailed off, both of them knowing their precarious situation made long-term planning impossible. But their apartment, though small and crumbling, was immaculate. Library books were stacked neatly on milk crates that served as shelves. Emily's school artwork covered water stains on the walls. A small Christmas tree, rescued from someone's trash and decorated with handmade ornaments, stood in the corner, their attempt at normalcy in increasingly desperate times. I'll just do a quick run before dinner, Emily said, reaching for her box of gum. The same box she'd been refilling for 3 years, since Evelyn first got sick. My cielo, it's getting dark. Evelyn's protest was cut short by another coughing fit. The business people leave their offices late. They have more money than Emily's practiced smile couldn't quite hide her worry. Maybe I'll make enough for your medicine this time. Evelyn watched helplessly as her daughter bundled up in layers of worn clothing. Each day, the guilt ate at her a little more. A mother should provide for her child, not the other way around. But since losing her second job when the factory closed and with her illness getting worse. Be careful, my amor. Stay where there are lights and people. Emily nodded, wrapping her mother's old scarf around her face. "I'll be back before dinner. Don't forget to take your medicine." Outside, Thompson Heights was a maze of condemned buildings and construction sites. What had once been a close-knit community was being slowly devoured by luxury development projects. Every week, more families disappeared, some to shelters, some to overcrowded relatives' homes, some simply vanishing into the city's shadows. Emily walked quickly, keeping to well-lit streets. Her regular route took her past gleaming office buildings where warmth spilled out through revolving doors. But she'd learned the best spots to catch people leaving work, mastered the art of looking pathetic enough to attract sympathy, but not so desperate as to frighten people away. Evening, Emily Officer Martinez, no relation, called from his patrol car. "Little late to be out selling, isn't it?" "Almost done, sir. Just need a few more dollars." He frowned, concerned. "Your mama doing okay?" Better, Emily lied smoothly. "The new medicine helps." The officer knew she was lying. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Evelyn was getting worse, but he just nodded. "Don't stay out too late. Weather's turning bad." Emily continued her rounds, carefully counting her earnings. $6.75. Not even close to enough. Her mother's medication cost nearly $200 per refill, even with the clinic's sliding scale. As she walked, Emily passed the construction site that had once been her school playground. Soon, according to the giant billboard, it would be the Kelly Residence's luxury living in historic Thompson Heights. The same company was buying their building next. They had until Christmas Eve to leave, though no one knew where they would go. A gust of wind nearly knocked her over, sending a Kelly development brochure skittering past. Emily caught a glimpse of the company's CEO, a stern-faced man in an expensive suit, the same man who'd had her thrown out of the restaurant earlier that day. The memory still burned. She'd been desperate enough to try the fancy restaurant, hoping the wealthy diners might be feeling generous. Instead, she'd been treated like something scraped off someone's shoe, roughly expelled into the snow, while diners barely looked up from their $100 lunches. Shivering, Emily turned toward home. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and she'd learned the hard way about staying out too late in winter. Last year, a boy from her building had fallen asleep in a doorway during a cold snap. They'd found him the next morning, frozen. Back in their apartment, Evelyn had managed to make soup from nearly empty cabinets. "Only a few more spoonfuls of your medicine left," Emily reported, emptying her pockets onto the table. "But I can try again tomorrow. Maybe go up to the theater district." "No, my amor," Evelyn pulled her daughter close, feeling how cold she was. "No more selling in the cold. We'll figure something out." Emily snuggled into her mother's embrace, pretending not to notice how thin she'd become, how her hands shook even holding a spoon. "I had a dream last night," she said quietly, "about my birth mother." Evelyn stiffened slightly. They rarely spoke of Emily's adoption, arranged in desperate circumstances 8 years ago. What kind of dream? She was sad, looking for something. "Looking for me." Maybe Emily stirred her soup thoughtfully. "Do you think she ever thinks about me?" "I'm sure she does, my amor." Evelyn stroked Emily's hair, remembering the young woman who'd entrusted her baby to a stranger's care. "I'm sure she thinks about you every day." Later that night, after Emily was asleep, Evelyn pulled out a battered shoebox from under her bed. Inside was a newspaper clipping about Isabel Kelly's death in childbirth, a birth certificate with no mother's name listed, and a letter she'd never been able to bring herself to open. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered to the empty room. "How can I protect her from the truth when we're about to lose everything?" Outside, snow continued to fall on Thompson Heights. In a few weeks, bulldozers would destroy the only home Emily had ever known. Evelyn's illness was getting worse, her medicine running out. And somewhere out there, powerful men were guarding dangerous secrets that could change everything. Evelyn tucked the shoebox away and checked on Emily one more time. Her daughter slept peacefully, clutching her box of gum even in sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, but for now, in their small, cold apartment, they had each other. Sometimes love had to be enough. The boardroom of Kelly Tower hummed with anticipation. 20 of New York's most powerful executives sat around a gleaming mahogany table, their reflections distorted in its polished surface. At precisely 9 a.m., James Kelly strode in, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, gesturing to the digital display behind him, "I present Phase 3 of the Thompson Heights Regeneration Project," the screen filled with architectural renderings of gleaming high-rises and manicured parks. "By this time next year, the last vestiges of urban decay will be cleared from what is becoming Manhattan's most promising development zone." A senior board member cleared his throat. "The press is raising concerns about displacement. Over 300 families that will be adequately compensated according to law." James cut in smoothly. "Change requires sacrifice. New York wasn't built by sentiment." The morning proceeded with mechanical efficiency until James's assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Sir, there's a situation in the lobby. A woman claiming to have sensitive information about Mrs. Kelly." James maintained his composure, but his knuckles whitened around his pen. "Handle it." "She's causing quite a scene, sir. Says she won't leave until—" "Then have security remove her." His tone left no room for discussion. Later that afternoon, James sat alone in the Blanc, his regular lunch spot, reviewing the morning's events. The woman had been dealt with, but her words nagged at him. The truth about Isabel Kelly, what truth could there possibly be? The restaurant's door chimed. Through the winter gloom, a small figure slipped past the maitre d'. James recognized her immediately, the same girl from the previous day, but now her determination was tinged with desperation. "Please, sir," she approached his table, shivering violently. "My mother. She's very sick. She sent me to find you." James signaled for security, but something stopped him from immediately having her removed. Perhaps it was the way she stood her ground, or how her eyes held his with an unsettling familiarity. "Your mother. The woman from this morning." Emily nodded. "She has something important to tell you. About Isabel." The name sent a jolt through him. "How do you know that name?" "Mom says. She says you need to know the truth before it's too late." Security arrived, but James held up his hand. "Wait," he studied the girl more carefully. Those eyes. Where had he seen them before? "What's your mother's name?" "Evelyn Martinez. We live in Thompson Heights. The building your company is getting demolished." James finished. "A coincidence or something more calculated? Tell your mother if she wants to discuss anything. She can make an appointment through proper channels." "We tried. Your people won't let us in." And now Emily's voice cracked. "Mom's really sick. The medicine costs too much, and with the eviction coming—" "That's not my concern." James's voice hardened. "I don't respond to emotional manipulation, especially not from children sent to peddle sob stories." Emily straightened, something fierce flashing in her eyes. "I'm not lying. And Mom says. She says she knows what really happened at the hospital that night. About the baby that didn't die." The room seemed to freeze. James felt the blood drain from his face. "What did you say?" But Emily was already backing away, suddenly afraid of the intensity in his expression. "I have to go. Mom said if you want to know more, come to 1242 Thompson Street, apartment 4 billion, before the demolition." She turned and fled, leaving James staring after her. So one of the security guards approached uncertainly. "Should we stop her?" James watched the small figure disappear into the swirling snow outside. "No," he pulled out his phone. "Get me everything on Evelyn Martinez and her daughter, and call Scott Vager. Tell him to meet me in my office. Immediately. As he gathered his things, James caught his reflection in the window. For a moment, superimposed over his own face, he saw Isabel's eyes looking back at him. The same eyes he'd just seen in a desperate child selling gum. "Impossible," he whispered. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and with it, the first crack in the carefully constructed walls around his heart. The Thompson Heights Community Center was packed beyond capacity. Residents huddled together in winter coats, their breath visible in the poorly heated space. At the front, behind a table with Kelly Development's logo, corporate representatives prepared their presentation. "This is just for show," whispered Mrs. Chen, who'd run the neighborhood bodega for 30 years. "They've already decided our fate." Evelyn sat near the back, one arm protectively around Emily, the other clutching a manila envelope. Her chest felt tight, whether from anxiety or illness. She couldn't tell anymore. Scott Vager stepped up to the microphone, his designer suit a stark contrast to the audience's worn clothing. "Kelly Development is pleased to announce the final phase of Thompson Heights revitalization. Our $500 million investment will transform this struggling neighborhood into—" "You mean destroy our home?" someone shouted. "Where are we supposed to go?" called another voice. Scott maintained his corporate smile. "Every qualified resident will receive fair compensation and relocation assistance." Qualified meaning what demanded Pastor Rodriguez standing. "Half my congregation doesn't have formal leases. Some are undocumented. What happens to them?" The meeting descended into chaos. Security guards moved closer to the corporate table. Outside, protesters' chants grew louder. "Housing is a human right. Thompson Heights stands up to fight." Emily tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mom, look!" Through the community center's windows, they could see James Kelly himself stepping out of a black SUV. The crowd parted as he entered, his presence commanding silence. "I'll be direct," he addressed the room. "This neighborhood's transformation is inevitable. Progress cannot be stopped by sentiment or nostalgia." "Progress?" Evelyn stood suddenly, her voice carrying clearly. "Is that what you call making families homeless at Christmas?" James's eyes found her in the crowd. Recognition flickered across his face. "Ms. Martinez," he acknowledged coolly. "I understand you've been persistent in trying to reach me." "Because you need to hear the truth." She took a step forward, swaying slightly. "About what Scott Vager did. About Isabel. About your daughter." The room went deathly quiet. Scott's face drained of color. "Mom," Emily whispered urgently, "your medicine." But Evelyn continued, her voice growing stronger. 8 years ago, at Metropolitan Hospital." She never finished. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed. The manila envelopes scattered papers across the floor as Emily screamed, "Mom." Chaos erupted anew. Someone called an ambulance. Through her panic, Emily saw James Kelly staring at one of the fallen papers, a newspaper clipping about his wife's death. For just a moment, his mask slipped, revealing raw pain beneath. Scott quickly gathered the scattered documents, but not before Emily saw him pocket something, a photograph she'd never seen before. Clear the room security began ushering people out. Meeting's over. Pastor Rodriguez helped carry Evelyn to a chair while waiting for paramedics. Emily clung to her mother's hand, terrified by how cold it felt. "Your mother needs urgent medical care," James said, suddenly beside them. His voice was different, uncertain. "I'll have my driver take you to the hospital." "We can't afford," Emily began. "I'll handle it." He wasn't looking at Evelyn, but at Emily, studying her face with disturbing intensity. "Considerate, professional courtesy." Scott appeared, gripping James's arm. "James, we need to discuss." Later, James's tone was sharp. "First, ensure Ms. Martinez receives proper care. And Scott, find out what happened to those documents." In the ambulance, Emily held her mother's hand while paramedics worked. Through the window, she saw James Kelly standing in the snow, watching them leave. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were clenched into fists. At the hospital, a nurse tried to lead Emily to the waiting room. "Family only with patients." "She is family," Evelyn whispered weakly. "My daughter." The nurse looked skeptical, noting their different features, biological or adopted. Before Emily could answer, a new voice cut in. "Is there a problem?" James Kelly stood in the doorway, his authority filling the space. "MS Martinez and her daughter are under my personal care." The nurse quickly backed down. As they wheeled Evelyn away, Emily found herself alone with the man who'd ordered their eviction. He seemed different now, less certain, almost haunted. "Your mother," he began awkwardly. "When she mentioned Isabel." "She says the truth will destroy everything you built." Emily met his gaze steadily. "But lies already have." James studied her face again, searching for something. Finally, he pulled out his phone. "Cancel tomorrow's board meeting, and get me every record from Metropolitan Hospital from 8 years ago. Everything about Isabel Kelly and the baby." As he turned to leave, Emily called after him. "We're not just numbers on a spreadsheet, you know. We're people, with stories, with hearts." He paused but didn't turn around. Sometimes knowing the truth changes nothing. "No," Emily replied, "but not knowing it changes everything." Outside the hospital windows, snow continued to fall on New York City. In Thompson Heights, bulldozers waited like sleeping giants. And somewhere in the night, Scott Vager made an urgent phone call. "We have a problem." She kept evidence. "Yes, all these years." "No, I don't know how much the girl knows." "Yes, sir. I understand. It will be handled." The wheels of fate had been set in motion. There would be no stopping them now. Life has a way of revealing its deepest truths in unexpected moments, just like this story we've shared together. If you felt touched by James and Emily's journey, join our storytelling family by hitting subscribe. Let's explore more tales of redemption, love, and second chances together in this space. The private wing of Mount Sinai Hospital hummed with expensive silence. James sat in his leather chair, watching Evelyn Martinez's monitors beep steadily. She hadn't regained consciousness since her collapse, but her condition had stabilized. Money still bought the best medical care in New York. "Mr. Kelly," a nurse appeared with a stack of folders. "The records you requested from Metropolitan Hospital archives." James waited until he was alone before opening the first file. His hands trembled slightly. He hadn't reviewed these documents since that night 8 years ago. Isabel's medical records, birth complications, the death certificate, and then something was wrong. He read through the files again, his corporate training catching inconsistencies. Timestamps didn't align. Signatures varied. Small discrepancies that he'd been too grief-stricken to notice before. His phone buzzed. "Scott." "Not now," he texted back. Pulling out his laptop, James accessed his private cloud drive, searching for Isabel's photos. The last image taken of her alive, holding their newborn daughter. He'd never been able to look at it properly, the pain too raw. But now he forced himself to study every detail. The hospital room number 414, the timestamp 9:42 p.m., the small birthmark on the baby's left wrist, shaped like a crescent moon. His eyes snapped to Emily, asleep in a chair beside her mother's bed. Her left wrist, exposed where her sleeve had pulled up, bore an identical mark. "Impossible," he whispered. But the evidence mounted. He compared Emily's features with the old photos of Isabel, the same determined set of the jaw, the same intense eyes. Even the way she slept, head tilted slightly, hands curled inward, mirrored Isabel's habits. His phone buzzed again. Multiple messages from Scott. We need to talk. Don't trust the hospital records. Remember our agreement. What agreement? James's mind raced back. The night had been a blur of grief and confusion. Scott had handled everything, the paperwork, the arrangements, the press, had been handling everything ever since, including Thompson Heights. The realization hit like a physical blow. Scott had pushed hardest for the development project, had insisted on the Christmas Eve eviction deadline, had been conveniently present every time questions about the past surfaced. A sound at the door made him look up. Dr. Richardson, the physician who'd been present the night Isabel died, stood frozen in the doorway. The old man's face went pale at the sight of James. "You," James said quietly. "We need to talk." The doctor glanced nervously down the hall. "Mr. Kelly, I have patience." 8 years ago. Metropolitan Hospital. What really happened? "I don't. That is," Mr. Vager said. "Scott. What about Scott?" But the doctor was already backing away. "I can't. They threatened my family. I'm sorry." He turned to flee, only to collide with a nurse bringing Evelyn's evening medication. The impact sent him stumbling. As James moved to help, something fell from the doctor's coat, an envelope, thick with cash. Their eyes met. In that moment, 8 years of carefully constructed lies began to crumble. "Security," the doctor shouted suddenly. "This man isn't authorized." "I own this hospital," James cut in coldly. "Start talking." But a commotion down the hall interrupted them. Scott Vager strode toward them, flanked by 2 men who definitely weren't hospital security. James, Scott called, too cheerfully. "Let's discuss this in private." James looked back at Emily, still sleeping peacefully, at her wrist with its crescent birthmark, at Evelyn, who'd risk everything to protect a child. His child? 8 years of grief and bitterness had built his empire. But what if it was all based on a lie? "No more private discussions," James said quietly, reaching for his phone. "No more secrets." "Don't," Scott warned. His smile vanished. "Think about what you're risking. Your company, your reputation, everything we built." "What did you do, Scott? What did you do to my family?" Before Scott could answer, a small voice broke the tension. "He stole me." Emily was awake, her eyes, Isabel's eyes, fixed on Scott with extraordinary clarity. "He took me the night I was born. Made you think I died? Because if I lived," she glanced at the financial papers scattered across James's lap, "the company would be mine when I turned 18, not his." The silence that followed was deafening. In it, James could hear the sound of his world shifting on its axis. "Get them," Scott snapped to his men. But James was already moving, placing himself between the threats and his daughter. His daughter. The truth of it sang in his blood, undeniable as sunrise. The next few moments were chaos. Security alarms blared. Real hospital security arrived. Scott and his men vanished into the confusion, but not before Scott called back. "You can't prove anything, James, and if you try, well, accidents happen, even to little girls." When calm returned, James found himself still standing guard over Emily, his heart pounding with unfamiliar emotions, fear, rage, and something else, something he thought had died with Isabel. Love. Emily looked up at him, uncertain. "I always wondered why Mum kept that old photo of you and Isabel. Why she made me memorize your face." "Emily," words failed him. "It's okay," she said softly. "You didn't know. But now you do." Behind them, Evelyn stirred, her eyes fluttering open. The truth was out, but the danger was just beginning. Scott wouldn't give up his prize easily, and James. James had to decide what mattered more, the empire he'd built on lies or the daughter he'd lost to them. In the winter night outside, snow fell on a city of shadows and secrets. But within room 414, the same number as Emily's birth room, a father and daughter began the long journey back to each other, while the woman who'd protected their chance at reunion watched with tears in her eyes. The price of redemption would be high, but as James Kelly finally held his daughter's hand, he knew some things were worth any cost. Thompson Heights erupted into chaos the next morning. Police barricades went up at dawn, and demolition crews moved in despite the bitter cold. News vans lined the streets, their reporters battling the wind to deliver live updates on the Christmas eviction crisis. This is Sandra Chen for Channel 7 News, live from Thompson Heights, where Kelly Development's controversial eviction plan has sparked protests. Behind me, community members are forming human chains to prevent. A commotion interrupted her broadcast as Scott Vager's convoy of black SUVs pushed through the crowd. He emerged, flanked by private security, his usual corporate polish showing signs of strain. "Mr. Vager, what's your response to allegations of illegal eviction practices?" "Kelly Development follows all legal requirements," Scott snapped. "No further comments." Inside the condemned building, Evelyn's apartment had become a makeshift command center for the resistance. Pastor Rodriguez coordinated with legal aid lawyers, while Mrs. Chen distributed hot coffee to protesters. Emily watched from the window as more police arrived. "They can't find us here," Evelyn whispered, still weak from her hospital stay. James had arranged her early release, sensing she'd be safer hidden among her community than exposed in the hospital. "He'll look here first," Emily replied, meaning Scott. "He knows this is home." A knock at the door sent everyone into silence. Pastor Rodriguez moved to answer it, baseball bat in hand, but it was only Officer Martinez. "You need to see this," he said, handing over a police file. "I found it in the archives. 8 years ago, a nurse reported suspicious activity at Metropolitan Hospital, a baby's death certificate with inconsistent details. She disappeared the next day, transferred to a hospital in Arizona with a massive bonus." Evelyn's hands shook as she read. "This proves the forgery, but not who ordered it," the officer finished. "And after 8 years." Another knock, harder this time. Through the peephole, they saw James Kelly himself, alone. "Don't," Pastor Rodriguez warned, but Evelyn was already opening the door. James stepped in, snow melting on his expensive coat. The room's hostility was palpable. He looked somehow diminished without his corporate armor, more human in his uncertainty. "The demolition crews," he said. "I tried to stop them, but Scott. He's activated emergency protocols. Says there's no turning back." "There's always a choice," Emily said quietly. James looked at his daughter, the word still unfamiliar in his mind, and something cracked in his expression. "I've made so many wrong choices." "Choices that made you rich," someone muttered. "Rich, but empty," James acknowledged. "I thought. I believed Isabel and the baby Emily were dead. Scott handled everything. The paperwork, the funeral arrangements. Even suggested I focus on work to handle the grief. And I let him, because living with the pain was too hard." While he slowly took control of everything, Evelyn added, "Building your empire with money that should have been Emily's inheritance." The crash from outside made them jump. The demolition had begun on the neighboring building. "We have proof now," Officer Martinez said. "The nurse's report, the forged death certificate." "Circumstantial," James cut in. "Scott's too smart. He'll claim clerical errors, blame lower-level employees. We need Isabel's letter," Evelyn interrupted. Everyone turned to her. The one she wrote the night Emily was born. The one explaining everything she'd discovered about Scott's embezzlement. The real reason he had to make the baby disappear. Emily stared at her mother. "You have this letter." Added, "Scott's men took it during the community meeting. But I kept something else. Evelyn went to the loose floorboard under Emily's bed. Something even more dangerous. She pulled out a small USB drive. Isabel's actual medical records show she was stable after the birth, no complications. Proof the death certificate was forged. I was a nurse's aide that night. I saw what they did. Isabel knew too much, so she couldn't finish. James staggered slightly. They killed her? Scott, my best friend. And would have killed Emily too if I hadn't. Evelyn's voice broke. I'm so sorry, I should have told you sooner, but they threatened Emily's life if I ever. The building shook with another demolition blast. Through the window, they could see Scott directing operations, orchestrating the destruction of evidence along with Holmes. He's getting desperate, James said, which makes him dangerous. We need to. The door burst open. Private security flooded in, weapons drawn. Scott followed, smiling his corporate smile. Well, he said pleasantly, isn't this cozy? The happy family reunion, his eyes fixed on the USB drive in Evelyn's hand. I'll take that. It's over, Scott. James stepped forward. I know the truth. Truth? The truth is you're a fool, James. Always were. Too blinded by grief to see opportunities. Too weak to do what needed to be done. He gestured to his men. Take them all. The accident will be tragic, an entire floor collapsing during unauthorized entry of a condemned building. You won't get away with this, Emily said, her voice strong despite her fear. Scott's smile widened. But I already have, for 8 years. And really, who will miss a few poverty-stricken squatters? Progress demands sacrifice, isn't that right, James? Isn't that right, James? Isn't that what we always said? The words hit James like physical blows. His own philosophy turned against him. He looked at Emily, at Evelyn, who'd sacrificed everything to protect his child, at the community he'd condemned with his greed. Outside, the demolition crews moved closer. The walls trembled with each impact, and in room 4 billion, surrounded by guns and greed and desperate courage, the moment of truth arrived. The price of redemption would be heavy, but as James Kelly finally took a stand, not as a CEO, but as a father, he knew some debts had to be paid, no matter the cost. The New York Times headline screamed across morning editions, Christmas eviction controversy, Kelly development faces human rights investigation. Below, smaller headlines competed for attention, missing hospital records raise questions, corporate titans passed under scrutiny. Thompson Heights residents stand ground against demolition. In her glass-walled office at Channel 7, Sandra Chen reviewed footage from the previous day's confrontation. The scene played out again, protesters linking arms in the snow, demolition equipment looming like prehistoric beasts. Scott Vager's smug face as he dismissed questions about suspicious deaths. Run it again, she told her editor. Focus on Vager's expression when I mentioned Isabel Kelly. The footage zoomed in. The flicker of panic, quickly masked by corporate confidence. 8 years I've covered business news, Sandra murmured. Something never sat right about Isabel Kelly's death. A healthy woman dying suddenly after childbirth. And now this, she gestured to property records spread across her desk. Every major Kelly development project has Scott Vager's fingerprints all over it, always pushing for maximum displacement, minimum compensation. Her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number, Metropolitan Hospital. Archives. Look for nurse Sarah Collins, 2016, she knew. Meanwhile, in the mahogany paneled boardroom of Kelly Development, chaos reigned. Board members argued over emergency measures as stock prices plummeted. Where is James? Demanded Harrison Wells, head of the investment division. This crisis needs immediate. Mr. Kelly is indisposed, Scott interrupted smoothly. As acting CEO, I assure you. Acting CEO Victoria Chang, the longest-serving board member, raised an elegant eyebrow. When was this decided? James is unwell. The stress of recent events. You mean finding out his daughter's alive Victoria's voice cut like steel? That his best friend orchestrated the greatest fraud in corporate history? The room fell silent. Scott's smile tightened. Those are dangerous accusations, Victoria. But are they? Tell me, Scott, why did you push so hard for the Thompson Heights demolition? What evidence are you trying to bury? Before Scott could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from his private security team, target location secured, awaiting orders. This meeting is adjourned, Scott announced. And Victoria, remember your retirement package depends on company stability. Tragic. How many elderly people lose everything to? Cognitive decline. Across town, in the shabby office of the Community Herald, veteran reporter Mike Rodriguez, Pastor Rodriguez's brother, pieced together a different angle. His wall displayed 8 years of suspicious patterns, community leaders who opposed Kelly development mysteriously discredited, small businesses bankrupted by selective code enforcement, evidence vanishing from public records. His latest source was a former Kelly development security guard. Vager kept private files on everyone. Blackmail insurance, he called it. But the real dirt? Hidden in Thompson Heights. Something about the old hospital wing. Mike's research was interrupted by commotion outside. Through his window, he saw a familiar figure being escorted by police. Dr. Richardson, trying to shield his face from photographers. Dr. Mike called out, "Is it true you falsified Isabel Kelly's death certificate?" The old man's shoulders sagged. "They threatened my grandchildren," he whispered. "But God help me, I can't carry this sin anymore." In her private hospital room, Victoria Chang reviewed old board minutes on her tablet, her sharp mind connecting patterns. As Kelly Development's first female board member, she'd noticed things her male colleagues missed. The way Scott manipulated James's grief, the suspicious timing of key property acquisitions, the missing trust fund documents. Mrs. Chang, a nurse, entered with medication. Mr. Vager sent a gift basket. She gestured to elaborate flowers. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Remove them. And call my lawyer. It's time to correct an old mistake." At the 15th Precinct, Officer Martinez studied cold case files. 8 years of suspicious incidents around Kelly development projects. A pattern emerged, witnesses relocated, evidence misplaced, investigations stalled by pressure from above. His captain appeared in the doorway. "Leave it alone, Martinez. Orders from downtown." "Sir, there's a child's life at stake." "And your pension? Your daughter's college fund? Don't be a hero." The officer stared at a photo on his desk, his daughter at Emily's age. "Sometimes being a hero isn't a choice, sir." In their safe house, a forgotten church basement, Evelyn watched Emily sleep while James paced nearby. The businessman's expensive suit was crumpled, his face haunted. "She has Isabel's laugh," Evelyn said softly. "The first time I heard it, my heart nearly stopped. I knew keeping her was dangerous, but... Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Scott had evidence planted. "Made it look like I kidnapped her for ransom. One word from me and Emily would have ended up in foster care. Or worse, she met James's eyes. Could you have protected her then, when you couldn't even save Isabel?" The truth hit him like physical blows. His wealth, his power, all useless when it mattered most. "I failed them both." "No," Evelyn said firmly, "you were a victim too. But now you have a choice." James's phone buzzed. A message from Scott. "Final offer. Walk away. Keep your wealth. Or lose everything, including her." Through the basement window, they could see Thompson Heights. Demolition crews waited like patient predators. News vans circled. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, Scott Vager prepared his endgame. The pieces were in motion. The truth was emerging from 8 years of shadows. But truth alone wasn't enough, not against money and power and ruthless determination. In the end, it would come down to choices and sacrifices. The church basement was dark and cold, but for Emily it felt safer than their apartment had in weeks. She watched her two worlds collide as James and Evelyn huddled over documents scattered across a folding table, their breath visible in the winter air. "The original trust documents," James muttered, studying yellowed papers. Isabel changed everything just before he couldn't finish the sentence. Emily wouldn't just inherit money. She'd get controlling interest in the company at 18. Which made her a threat, Evelyn added, suppressing a cough. The hospital stay had weakened her, but her eyes remained fierce. Scott's entire empire built on stolen inheritance. Emily pretended to sleep on her makeshift cot, but she absorbed every word. 8 years of questions finally finding answers. Why Evelyn jumped at shadows, why they moved so often, why her mother made her memorize escape routes and emergency contacts. She studied James covertly. The famous businessman looked different now, his corporate mask cracking to reveal something raw and human beneath. His hands shook slightly as he touched old photos of Isabel. "I remember her smile," Emily said suddenly, making both adults turn. "Not really remember, but in dreams, she used to sing." James's breath caught. "Blackbird," he whispered. "Her favorite Beatles song." "She sang it the night Emily was born," Evelyn added softly. Right before she stopped, pain flickering across her face. "Tell me," James demanded. "I need to know everything." Evelyn closed her eyes, remembering. Isabel discovered financial irregularities, shell companies, missing funds. She was going to expose Scott after the birth. But someone must have warned him. There was a new nurse that night, one I'd never seen. She gave Isabel something in her IV. James stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "I'll kill him." "No," Emily said firmly, sounding older than her years. "That's what he wants. More violence, more secrets." Her words hung in the air, wisdom born from years watching Evelyn choose a harder path, protecting, not avenging. Above them, church bells tolled midnight. Christmas Eve had arrived. In a few hours, the demolition crews would move in. "We need to evacuate remaining residents," Evelyn said, practical despite her exhaustion. "Mrs. Chen refuses to leave her store. The Rodriguez family's youngest is sick. They can't move yet." James watched her, really seeing for the first time the woman who'd raised his daughter. Every line in her face spoke of sacrifices made, of choosing others' safety over her own peace. "Why?" he asked suddenly. "Why take such risks for a stranger's child?" Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "Because Isabel asked me to. Her last words were keep her safe, not from you, from them. From the corruption that killed her," she touched Emily's hair gently. "And because every child deserves love, stranger or not." The simple truth of it hit James like a physical blow. He'd spent 8 years building walls around his heart, while Evelyn had opened hers to a child who needed protection. His phone buzzed. "Victoria Chang, evidence secured. Board meeting emergency session. Get here now." Hope flared, but Emily's next words doused it. "It's a trap," she said quietly. "Mrs. Chang. I saw Scott visiting her at the hospital. He had papers for her to sign." James stared at his daughter. "How do you know these things?" "I watch. I listen. When you're invisible to rich people, you see everything." She smiled sadly. "Like how you used to watch our building before the eviction notices, standing across the street in your expensive car, never getting out." Another truth that cut deep. He had watched, drawn by something he couldn't name. Had seen Emily playing in the snow, Evelyn working multiple jobs, the community supporting each other through hard times. Had seen but chosen not to feel. Until now. A commotion upstairs interrupted his thoughts. Pastor Rodriguez hurried down, his face grave. "They're here. Dozens of them. Private security, not police." Scott's not waiting for morning, James realized. He's making his move now. Evelyn moved with practiced efficiency, grabbing their emergency bags, but her legs buckled, the illness still weakening her. Mum Emily rushed to support her. James moved without thinking, helping Evelyn to a chair. "You need a hospital." "No time," she gasped. "Get Emily out. There's a tunnel, old prohibition route. Pastor knows the way." "I'm not leaving you," Emily cried. "Listen to me, my amor." Evelyn cupped her daughter's face. "Everything I've done was to keep you safe. Don't let that be for nothing." Heavy footsteps echoed above. James looked between them, the mother who'd sacrificed everything to protect his child, and the daughter he'd only just found. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside him. Years of corporate callousness fell away. He finally understood what Isabel had fought for, what Evelyn had protected, what truly mattered. "No one gets left behind," he said firmly. "Not this time." Emily's eyes, Isabel's eyes, filled with tears of gratitude. Pastor Rodriguez returned with Mrs. Chen and other community leaders. "We'll hold them off. Buy you time." "They'll destroy everything," Mrs. Chen said simply. "But some things matter more than buildings." The basement filled with residents emerging from shadows, dozens of them, armed with makeshift weapons and desperate courage. "Family protects family," Pastor Rodriguez declared. "And this community? We're all family here." James Kelly, who'd spent years calculating everything in dollars and cents, finally saw the true wealth before him. Not in property values or profit margins, but in the fierce love of a community willing to risk everything to protect its own. His phone buzzed again. "Scott, final warning. Don't make me destroy you." James looked at Emily, supporting Evelyn despite her own fear. At the community leaders standing ready to fight. At the photos of Isabel, whose death had started this path. The time for warnings was past. The time for redemption had come. Above them, the first sounds of confrontation began. Christmas Eve in Thompson Heights would be a night of choices, of sacrifices, of long-buried truths finally exposed. And for James Kelly, it would be the night he finally chose what kind of man, what kind of father he truly wanted to be. The price would be heavy. But as he stood with his daughter and her true family, he knew some things were worth any cost. The storm hit Thompson Heights with apocalyptic fury. Weather services called it the worst blizzard in New York's history, but for those trapped in the condemned building, nature's wrath was the least of their concerns. "They've cut the power," Pastor Rodriguez reported, his flashlight beam cutting through darkness. "Heat's gone. Water next." In the basement command center, James watched ice crystals form on windows. The temperature had plummeted to dangerous levels. Around him, the remaining residents huddled in donated blankets, mostly elderly and families with children who had nowhere else to go. "How long can we last?" he asked Evelyn, who was organizing their dwindling medical supplies. Without heat, she glanced at Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, asleep and feverish. At her own deteriorating condition. "Hours, maybe. The children and elderly will suffer first." Emily appeared from her lookout position. More trucks arriving. Not just security demolition crews, they're setting up floodlights. James checked his phone. No signal. Scott had been thorough, cutting them off from the outside world. The last news reports had been ominous: roads closed, emergency services overwhelmed by the storm. The perfect cover for whatever Scott had planned. Mum Emily's voice cracked. "You're bleeding?" Evelyn quickly wiped her mouth but couldn't hide the red stain. The cold was accelerating her illness. "I'm fine, my amor. Just a coughing fit doubled her over." James caught her before she fell. Up close, he could see how fragile she'd become, how much strength it took just to stay upright. This woman who'd sacrificed everything to protect his child was dying by inches. The hospital, he started, is controlled by your board, she finished weakly. Scott's men will be waiting. A crash from above made them all jump. The demolition had begun, methodically weakening the building's structure. They're going to bury us, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Make it look like an accident. Poor people in condemned building ignored evacuation orders. No, James's voice was steel. I won't let that happen. What can you do? Someone challenged. Your money's frozen, your power's gone. You're just another trapped rat now. The words stung because they were true. James Kelly, who'd once commanded an empire, couldn't even save a sick woman and a group of children from freezing to death. Emily's small hand slipped into his. But he's not alone. The simple gesture broke something in him. Years of corporate armor cracked, revealing the father he should have been, the man Isabel had loved. Listen to me, he addressed the room. I know you have no reason to trust me. I'm the one who signed your eviction notices, who valued profit over people, who forgot that buildings are more than assets, they're homes, families, dreams. He looked at Emily, at Evelyn struggling to breathe. I forgot a lot of things, but I remember now, and I swear if you stand with me I will spend the rest of my life making this right. Silence met his words. Then Pastor Rodriguez stepped forward. Pretty speech, but what's your actual plan? Before James could answer, his phone suddenly buzzed. One bar of signal, fighting through the storm. A message from Sandra Chen, evidence secured. Full expose ready. Give the word. Hope flared. But Emily's next words froze his blood. Someone's coming down the stairs. They killed the flashlights. In the darkness, footsteps approached multiple sets, moving with purpose. Get behind me, James whispered to Emily. No, she whispered back. Together. The basement door opened. Flashlight beams swept the room, and Scott Vager's voice cut through the darkness. Really, James? Hiding in a basement with rats? How far the mighty are fallen? The lights found them, James and Emily standing together, Evelyn supported by Pastor Rodriguez, residents forming a protective circle around their most vulnerable. Scott stepped into view, flanked by security. His expensive coat was dusted with snow, his corporate smile fixed in place. I'm here to save you all, he announced magnanimously. Emergency evacuation. The building's unsafe. Transport waiting outside. To where James demanded. Somewhere quiet, where we can discuss terms. Terms, James laughed bitterly. You killed Isabel, stole my daughter, built an empire on lies. What possible terms could there be? The terms that keep Emily alive. Scott's smile vanished. Did you think I'd let her destroy everything I've built? Let you play happy families while my legacy crumbles? The temperature seemed to drop further. Outside, demolition equipment rumbled closer. You have 10 minutes, Scott continued pleasantly. Come quietly, and everyone here gets generous relocation packages. Resist, he gestured at the walls. Well, buildings this old. Collapse happens. You're insane, James breathed. No, I'm pragmatic. Like you taught me to be. Scott surveyed the room. 10 minutes, James. Choose wisely. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Evelyn. That cough sounds terrible. Shame about the hospital being overwhelmed tonight. All those storm victims. The threat hung in the air like frost. When Scott's footsteps faded, panic erupted. Parents clutched children. Mrs. Chen began praying in Mandarin. But Emily's voice cut through the chaos, the tunnel. Everyone turned to her. The Prohibition Tunnel, she continued. It leads to the old hospital wing, where it happened, where the evidence is. What evidence? James asked. The real reason we never left Thompson Heights. Emily looked at Evelyn. Show him, Mom. Evelyn pulled out an old key ring. Isabel gave these to me. Said if anything happened, I should protect what's in locker 242. The hospital morgue, James whispered. But they demolished that wing years ago. No, Emily said. They just made you think they did. Scott's been using it, hiding things. I've seen the lights at night. Hope and fear warred in James's chest. Proof of Scott's crimes waited in the darkness, but reaching it meant risking everything. He looked at his daughter, standing brave despite her fear. At Evelyn, fighting for breath. At the families watching him, waiting to see if he'd abandon them again. The building shook as demolition equipment moved closer. The storm howled. They had minutes to decide. Stay and freeze, run and be hunted, or fight back and risk everything. The old Prohibition Tunnel was a nightmare of ice and darkness. James led the way, supporting Evelyn while Emily guided them using her intimate knowledge of the underground passage. Behind them, the remaining residents followed in tense silence, carrying their youngest and oldest. Wait, Emily whispered. Listen. Above, demolition equipment rumbled. The tunnel ceiling shed decades-old dust. They'll bring it all down on us, Mrs. Chen murmured. No, James said. Scott wants what's in that locker. He won't risk destroying it. They reached a junction where the tunnel split. Ancient brick walls glistened with ice. Left, Emily said confidently. The morgue corridor. How do you know these tunnels so well? James asked. I explored them when Mom was too sick to work. Found all the old hospital access points. That's how she hesitated. That's how I first saw you months ago. Coming to secret meetings with Scott in the old wing. Another truth that cut deep. While he'd been plotting developments in shadows, his own daughter had been watching, surviving, learning the secrets of the world that had stolen her birthright. The tunnel widened into a larger space. Emergency lights cast sickly shadows on abandoned medical equipment, and there, along one wall, rows of old morgue lockers. 242, Evelyn gasped, fighting for breath. Upper right corner. James found it. The key shook in his hands. Well, isn't this cozy? They spun. Scott stood in a connecting doorway, flanked by armed men. More guards blocked other exits. I must admit, he continued conversationally, I'm impressed. Didn't think you had it in you anymore, James. Actually getting your hands dirty, choosing sentiment over business. It's over, Scott. James stepped forward. Whatever's in this locker. We'll never see the light of day. Scott's pleasant mask slipped. 8 years I've protected you from the truth. Carried the burden while you played grieving widower. Built your empire while you wallowed in self-pity. Protected me. You killed my wife. Isabel was weak, like you've become. She would have destroyed everything with her bleeding heart ethics and corporate responsibility. Scott spat the words. The company needed a different direction, needed strength. So you murdered her, stole my daughter, all for money. What legacy? Scott's composure cracked completely. Look around you. We've transformed this city, built towers where slums once stood, created wealth where there was only poverty. That's power, that's immortality. That's enough. The new voice startled everyone. Sandra Chen stepped from the shadows, camera crew behind her. They'd followed through a different tunnel access. We've got it all, Mr. Vager. Your confession, the evidence, the whole story. Kill them, Scott ordered his men. Kill them all. But the guards hesitated. Through other doorways, SWAT teams appeared, weapons raised. Officer Martinez led them. Drop your weapons, he commanded. The whole area's surrounded. Scott laughed manically. You think this changes anything? I own judges, politicians. This evidence never reaches a courtroom. Maybe not, James said quietly. But Isabel's letter will reach the board. The proof of your embezzlement, the real financial records. He opened locker 242. Inside lay a sealed evidence bag, medical records, financial documents, a letter in Isabel's handwriting, and photographs Scott accepting payoffs, meeting with known criminals, standing over Isabel's hospital bed with a syringe. She knew, Emily said softly. My mother knew what you were. She was gathering evidence. That's why you had to silence her. Scott's face contorted. With shocking speed, he grabbed Emily, pressing a gun to her head. Back off, he screamed, or she dies like her mother. The room froze. Police held their positions. James felt his world teetering on a knife's edge. Then Evelyn, summoning strength from some deep reserve, spoke. Let her choose. Everyone stared at her. Evelyn continued. Remember what I taught you. About family. About courage. About doing what's right, no matter the cost. Emily met her eyes. Some understanding passed between them. I choose, Emily said clearly, to be my mother's daughter. She slammed her heel into Scott's instep, just as Evelyn had taught her. As he stumbled, she twisted free. James lunged forward. The gun went off. Time seemed to stop. Then Scott fell, clutching his shoulder. Officer Martinez had taken the shot. As SWAT teams swarmed in, Emily ran to Evelyn, who had collapsed. James knelt beside them, gathering both into his arms. Stay with us, he pleaded. Please, we need you. Evelyn smiled weakly. You have each other now. That's what matters. No, Emily said fiercely. We need both our parents, all of us. She looked at James, who understood suddenly what she meant. Family wasn't just blood, it was choice, love, sacrifice. Medics, he shouted. She needs help. As paramedics rushed in, Sandra Chen was already broadcasting breaking news from Thompson Heights, where a shocking conspiracy has been uncovered. Scott, being handcuffed, screamed threats and promises of revenge. But James focused only on his family. Emily, brave and strong like both her mothers, and Evelyn, who had sacrificed everything to protect not just a child, but the truth itself. Outside, the storm began to ease. Dawn was breaking over New York City, and in the old hospital morgue, surrounded by proof of past crimes and promises of future justice, a broken family began to heal. The price of redemption had been high, but as James held his daughter while paramedics worked to save the woman who had raised her, he knew some prices were worth paying. Some truths worth fighting for. Some families worth any sacrifice to protect. Life has a way of weaving extraordinary tales through ordinary moments. Like James and Emily's story, sometimes the deepest truths emerge from the darkest winters of our lives. If their journey of redemption, sacrifice, and unconditional love has touched your heart, we invite you to join our storytelling family. By subscribing, you'll be part of a community that celebrates these powerful human experiences. Together, we'll explore more stories that remind us what truly matters, not the empires we build, but the lives we touch and the love we choose to give. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. The emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital pulsed with controlled chaos. Outside, the storm had paralyzed much of Manhattan, but inside a more personal tempest was unfolding. BP dropping, a nurse called out. O2 stats falling. Evelyn lay pale and still on the trauma bed, machines beeping urgent warnings. The bullet meant for Emily had grazed her during the chaos, but it was the advanced pneumonia that was killing her, months of cold and deprivation finally taking their toll. Emily pressed against the observation window, her breath fogging the glass. Please, Mom, please fight. James stood behind her, his own heart breaking twice, once for his daughter's pain, and once for the realization of how much Evelyn had sacrificed while he lived in luxury. Mr. Kelly, Dr. Patel approached with a grave expression. A word. In the hallway, the doctor's words fell like hammer blows: advanced respiratory failure, systemic infection, months of untreated illness. James interrupted. Whatever it takes, best specialists, experimental treatments. Mr. Kelly, Dr. Patel said gently, this isn't about money anymore. The damage, she's been pushing herself far too long, fighting to stay alive, to protect. To protect my daughter, the truth burned like acid, while I did nothing. Back in the waiting room, more cruel realities awaited. Detective Rivera wanted statements. Child Services had questions about Emily's custody. And on the TV, the full scope of the tragedy was unfolding. Breaking news: Kelly development scandal widens. Multiple bodies discovered in abandoned hospital wing. Sources suggest victims were witnesses to corporate crimes dating back years. Emily watched the broadcast, her young face aged by understanding. How many, she asked quietly. How many people did he kill to keep his secret? James couldn't answer. The evidence from locker 242 had opened a Pandora's box of horrors. Not just Isabel's murder, but others: whistleblowers, journalists, anyone who'd threatened to expose the truth. Sir, his assistant approached cautiously. The board is meeting in emergency session. The company's stock. Let it burn, James said flatly. But it wasn't that simple. As his lawyers explained in harsh whispers, thousands of jobs were at stake. Pension funds, development projects across the city. The dominoes were falling, and each one represented lives that would be devastated. Your father built this company, Victoria Chang reminded him. She'd been cleared of involvement, but the guilt of her silence weighed heavily. Are you really willing to let it collapse? James looked at Emily, still pressed against the window, watching doctors fight for Evelyn's life. My father built a company. Scott built an empire of blood. What kind of legacy is that? The night deepened. Emily finally succumbed to exhaustion, curled in an uncomfortable waiting room chair. James draped his coat over her, noticing how small she looked. Just a child, carrying the weight of so many adult sins. But a soft sound made him turn. Through the window, he saw Evelyn's eyes flutter open. Emily, she whispered when he reached her side. Sleeping. She's safe. Everyone's safe now. Evelyn managed a weak smile. The evidence. Being processed. Scott's facing multiple murder charges. The company he swallowed hard. Everything's coming apart. Good, her voice was fading. Truth. Has a price. Isabel knew. Worth paying. Stay with us, James pleaded. Emily needs you. I need you. We can be a family. Already Evelyn's eyes drifted to Emily's sleeping form. Loved her. Like my own. Because she is. Love doesn't need blood. Her monitors began to wail. No, James grabbed her hand. Please, I don't know how to do this. How to be a father. How to make things right. Just love her, truth, and love. Rest follows. The medical team rushed in, but Evelyn's next words stopped them. Promise me. Protect them all. Not just Emily, all the children, all the families. I promise, James whispered. She smiled one last time, peace settling over her features. Then my job is done. Isabel would be proud. The monitor's keening turned continuous. Emily woke to the sound, somehow knowing. Her scream would haunt James forever. Mom. No, please, Mom. James caught her as she tried to run in, holding her as she fought and sobbed, holding his daughter as she lost her second mother to the machinery of greed and power. Outside, the storm raged on. In the hospital hallway, more revelations awaited evidence of larger conspiracies, more lives destroyed by corporate avarice. The price of truth was being counted in broken bodies and shattered lives. But in that moment, none of it mattered. There was only a father holding his daughter, both grieving a woman whose greatest crime had been loving a child enough to die protecting her. The tragedy wasn't just Evelyn's death. It was the system that had made such sacrifices necessary. The world that valued profit over people, power over truth. As dawn broke over a changed New York, James Kelly finally understood the full price of redemption, and knew with bitter certainty that they weren't finished paying it yet. The city buried Evelyn Martinez on Christmas Day. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow that seemed to mock their grief. Despite Kelly Development's collapse dominating headlines, hundreds came to the small church in Thompson Heights. Families who'd found shelter in her tiny apartment, children she'd tutored, lives she'd touched with quiet grace. Emily stood between James and Pastor Rodriguez, her black dress a stark contrast to the white snow. She hadn't spoken since the hospital, her silence more devastating than any tears. "She loved Christmas," Mrs. Chen whispered, laying a hand-knitted scarf on the casket. "Said it was when miracles happened." But the miracle they'd gotten exposing Scott's crimes, saving Thompson Heights, had cost too high a price. Back in Evelyn's apartment, the true scope of their loss became clear. Everything was meticulously organized: Emily's school records, medical history, photographs documenting every milestone. A mother's love expressed through careful preservation of memories. "Look at this," Pastor Rodriguez said softly, finding a stack of letters. Each was addressed to Emily, dated for future birthdays. The last was marked for your wedding day. Emily took them wordlessly, clutching them to her chest. James discovered his own heartbreak in a worn notebook. Evelyn had documented everything: Emily's first words, favorite foods, nighttime fears. Things a father should have known. Sir, his assistant, hovered in the doorway. There's more. The losses mounted like body blows. The company was in freefall. Thousands of employees faced unemployment right after Christmas. Development projects frozen, contractors unpaid, small businesses caught in the undertow of corporate collapse. Scott's crimes had tentacles everywhere. Each revelation brought new victims forward: families of disappeared whistleblowers, employees silenced by threats, communities destroyed by fraudulent developments. The legal implications were staggering. Class action lawsuits poured in. Federal investigations expanded. James's own culpability is willful blindness. His signature on devastating projects couldn't be ignored. "They're freezing all assets," his lawyer explained. "Personal accounts included. The penalties alone." But the deepest cuts were personal. Emily discovered her friends were leaving their families, taking settlement money, and fleeing the painful memories of Thompson Heights. The community that had protected her was dissolving. The Rodriguez family's bakery, a neighborhood fixture for generations, faced closure. Their loans had been through Kelly Development's banking arm, now under federal investigation. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter was pulled from Emily's class, her family moving in with relatives in Chicago. "Too many ghosts here," Mrs. Chen explained, tears in her eyes. Even the church wasn't spared. Their mortgage had been quietly bought by one of Scott's shell companies years ago. Now it was tangled in asset seizure proceedings. At night, in the hollow silence of his penthouse, James watched Emily sleep fitfully on his imported sofa. She'd refused to stay in any of the guest rooms, too grandiose, too far from the life she'd known. In sleep, her face would crumple, calling for a mother who would never answer again. "I don't know how to help her," he admitted to Pastor Rodriguez over late-night coffee. "None of us do," the pastor replied. "She's lost more than a mother. She's lost her whole world, the community that raised her, the life she knew. Because of me." my company, my blindness. Yes, the pastor said simply, but also because of love. Evelyn's love for Emily, the community's love for its children, even your love finally awakening. Love has a cost, Mr. Kelly, sometimes a terrible one. Outside his window, Thompson Heights glittered with Christmas lights, perhaps for the last time. Many families, despite the halted demolition, were leaving. The neighborhood's heart had died with Evelyn. Emily appeared in her pajamas, looking small and lost. I had a dream, she whispered, about Mom. Both of them, they were together, watching us. James gathered her close, feeling her tears soak his shirt. Isabel would have loved her, he said softly. Evelyn. They were alike in all the ways that mattered. Brave, principled, willing to die for the truth. Does it ever stop hurting? No, he answered honestly. But we honor their sacrifice by how we live, by the choices we make now. Emily pulled away slightly, studying his face. What are you going to do? It was the question that haunted him. His empire was crumbling, but its fall was crushing innocent lives. His wealth could help rebuild, but federal agents had frozen everything. His influence could protect some jobs, but his reputation was destroyed. The losses seemed endless, rippling outward like waves from a stone thrown in still water. Each revelation brought new pain, new victims, new consequences. But looking at his daughter, strong despite her grief, wise beyond her years, James finally understood what Evelyn and Isabel had died protecting. Not just Emily, but the truth itself. The belief that justice mattered more than profit, that love was worth any sacrifice. The price was devastating. But as father and daughter held each other in the Christmas night, they knew their losses were just beginning. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension on the morning Scott Vager's trial began. January's bitter cold had turned to freezing rain, but crowds still gathered, former employees, displaced families, media crews sensing history in the making. Inside, Emily sat between James and Sandra Chen, watching her father's former best friend being led in chains to the defendant's box. Scott looked smaller somehow, his corporate armor stripped away, leaving only a hollow man facing the consequences of his choices. All rise, the bailiff called. But before proceedings could begin, Scott's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement. The prosecutor objected, but Scott was already speaking, his voice carrying the practiced charm that had once commanded boardrooms. I acted alone. James Kelly knew nothing. The murders, the fraud, the cover-ups, all my initiative. I accept full responsibility. A murmur ran through the courtroom. James tensed, recognizing the manipulation. Scott was offering himself as a sacrifice, one last attempt to protect the corporate structure he'd built. But Emily stood suddenly, her clear voice cutting through the whispers. Let me tell you about my mother. All eyes turned to her. The judge, surprised, nodded for her to continue. Not Isabel Kelly, though Scott murdered her too. I mean Evelyn Martinez, who died protecting me from the truth. Or maybe she died protecting me with the truth. I'm still learning the difference. She pulled out a USB drive, not the one from the hospital, but another Evelyn had hidden years ago. Mom kept records of everything. Every late-night meeting she overheard while cleaning offices, every document she secretly copied, every phone call she recorded when corporate executives thought no one was listening. Sandra Chen's camera crew leaned forward. This was new evidence, unknown even to the prosecutors. My mother Isabel discovered the first frauds. But Evelyn? She documented 8 years of crimes, not just Scott's, the whole system. Board members taking bribes, politicians accepting payoffs, judges investing in shell companies. Scott's facade cracked. She was just a cleaning woman. Who would believe? She was my mother. Emily cut him off. And she was smart enough to protect everything with timestamps, verification codes, blockchain receipts. All those tech seminars she took at the community center. She was learning to build an unbreakable chain of evidence. James stared at his daughter in awe. Even now, Evelyn was teaching him about courage. The evidence was devastating. Video footage from hidden cameras, recorded conversations, financial records showing money flowing through countless shell companies, a web of corruption that entangled half of New York's power structure. But the most damning revelation came from an unexpected source. Victoria Chang rose from her seat in the gallery. "I have something to add." She approached the bench, arthritis making her steps slow but determined. 8 years ago, I suspected something was wrong with Isabel's death. I hired private investigators, but Scott discovered my investigation. She smiled bitterly. He didn't threaten me. He was too smart for that. Instead, he showed me how much good we could do with the money. Housing projects in poor neighborhoods, scholarships for underprivileged children, all funded by fraud, but helping real people. The courtroom was silent now, hanging on every word. I convinced myself it was worth it, that the end justified the means. I became complicit in a system that murdered a young mother, stole a child, and destroyed countless lives, all while pretending we were helping people. She turned to face Emily. "Your mother, Isabel, came to me the night she died. She had proof of the first frauds. I told her to wait, to think about the good we could do with that money. My hesitation killed her as surely as Scott's actions." The confession opened floodgates. Other board members stood, former executives, city officials, each carrying pieces of the truth they'd hidden for years. Scott watched his carefully constructed empire of lies collapse. His final mask slipped, revealing the rage beneath. "You idiots," he screamed. "We built something great. We transformed this city. A few lives sacrificed for the greater good." My mother's Emily's voice cut through his rant, taught me there is no greater good without truth, without justice, without love. James stood beside his daughter, finally ready to face his own culpability. "I was blind," he admitted to the court. "I chose not to see, not to question. My grief became an excuse for ignorance, and that ignorance allowed evil to flourish. I'm as guilty as anyone here." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Given these new revelations, this court orders an immediate expansion of the investigation. No one is above the law. No one. Outside, the freezing rain had turned to snow. News crews broadcasted live as more evidence emerged, more conspirators confessed, more victims found their voice. But in the courthouse bathroom, Emily faced her own private revelation. James found her staring at herself in the mirror, tears streaming silently. "I look like her," she whispered, "like Isabel. But I am Evelyn's daughter too. I carry them both inside me. Their courage, their love, their truth." James embraced her, his own tears falling. "They would be so proud of you," he said softly. "Both of them." The truth had finally been fully exposed, but as father and daughter held each other, they knew that revelation was only the beginning. The harder task lay ahead, building something new from the ashes of exposed lies, something worthy of the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. In the weeks following the trial, changes swept through New York like the winter winds. Kelly Development's collapse had triggered a seismic shift in the city's power structure. But the most profound transformations were happening quietly, in individual hearts and minds. James Kelly stood in his penthouse office, methodically packing away symbols of his former life. Each item carried memories now tainted by understanding deal-signing pens that had authorized evictions, awards for developments that had destroyed communities, photographs with people now facing indictment. "Need help?" Emily asked from the doorway. She'd been staying with him but hadn't yet called it home. "Just deciding what to keep," he replied, holding a framed magazine cover, his Forbes Man of the Year feature. Emily took it, studying the photo. "You look different here. Colder." I was. Success was my armor. Profit my religion, he smiled sadly. "Your mothers would have hated that version of me. But they'd be proud of who you're becoming." The simple truth in her words touched something deep inside him. James Kelly, who once measured everything in dollars and cents, was learning to calculate value differently. It showed in small ways at first. He attended every Thompson Heights community meeting, not to speak but to listen. Sat quietly in the back as families shared their stories of displacement, of struggles, of resilience. He learned his daughter's routines, her favorite breakfast cinnamon toast, cut diagonally like Evelyn made it, her reading habits mysteries, always mysteries, her nightmares losing another mother, over and over. He visited Evelyn's grave daily, sometimes with Emily, sometimes alone, brought fresh flowers and sat talking to both his daughters' mothers about his struggles to be worthy of their sacrifice. But the biggest changes came in his actions. When federal agents finished their asset seizure, James voluntarily surrendered everything else. His personal accounts, properties, investments all liquidated to create a restitution fund for victims of corporate fraud. "You don't have to do this," his lawyers protested. "The law doesn't require." "The law didn't require Evelyn to protect my daughter, he cut them off. Some obligations go beyond legal requirements." The penthouse was sold. James and Emily moved into a modest apartment in Thompson Heights, close to her school and the community that had become their extended family. Emily watched her father transform with a wisdom beyond her years. She saw him learning to cook simple meals, struggling with laundry, discovering the complexity of ordinary life. The corporate titan became simply a father, and in that simplicity found a deeper purpose. The community's transformation matched his own. Mrs. Chen's bodega became a neighborhood council center where displaced families could find resources and support. James often worked the evening shift, learning every resident's name and story. Pastor Rodriguez's church, freed from debt by the restitution fund, expanded its community programs. Emily started a youth group for children dealing with loss, sharing Evelyn's lessons about courage and truth. The abandoned hospital wing scene of so much tragedy was converted into a free medical clinic. James insisted on naming it after both Isabel and Evelyn, two mothers who died protecting more than just their child. But perhaps the most profound change was in how the story itself transformed. Sandra Chen's documentary series, The Price of Truth, became a catalyst for national discussion about corporate responsibility and human cost. Emily's testimony, describing how two mothers died protecting her, and justice, moved millions. Former Kelly development executives, facing their own reckonings, started coming forward with similar stories from other cities. A movement began demanding transparency and accountability in urban development. Victoria Chang, in her final years, established a whistleblower protection foundation so no one else dies for telling the truth. The transformation reached even into the justice system. Judges who had taken bribes resigned. Politicians who had enabled corruption faced recalls. The city began healing from decades of institutional rot. One evening, James found Emily in Evelyn's old apartment, now a community center reading room. She was showing younger children how to use the computers Evelyn had dreamed of providing. "Mum always said knowledge is power," she explained to her rapt audience. "But she also said power is nothing without compassion." James watched his daughter Isabel's determination shining through Evelyn's teachings and saw the future taking shape. Not in gleaming towers or profit margins, but in small acts of kindness, in truth spoken to power, in love passed from one generation to the next. That night, walking home through Thompson Heights, father and daughter stopped at the small memorial garden planted in Evelyn's honor. "Do you think they know Emily?" asked softly. "Mom and Isabel, do they know how much has changed?" James looked at his daughter, this miracle who had inherited the best of both her mothers, and felt the weight of transformation in his own heart. "They know," he said. "They see it in every life we touch, every truth we protect, every bit of love we put back into the world." The winter stars shone above Thompson Heights, witnessing the quiet revolution of hearts transformed by truth, by loss, by love. The price had been devastating, but the change it brought was beyond measure. In the end, that was the greatest transformation of all, learning that true value couldn't be calculated in dollars, only in lives touched and truth protected and love freely given. Just as Evelyn and Isabel had taught them, in their different ways all along. Spring came early to Thompson Heights. Green shoots pushed through soil where demolition equipment had once threatened destruction. The neighborhood, like its people, was healing and transforming. On a bright March morning, the community gathered in the newly renovated plaza outside the Isabel and Evelyn Memorial Clinic. The occasion was both an ending and a beginning. Scott Vager and his co-conspirators had been sentenced the day before. Despite his final attempts at manipulation, the evidence had been overwhelming. Multiple life terms, no possibility of parole. Justice, cold and clean as winter rain. But today wasn't about punishment, it was about restoration. James Kelly stood before the assembled crowd, Emily beside him, and announced the formation of the Thompson Heights Community Trust. "Everything I built through blind ambition, I now return through open eyes," he declared. "Every property, every development, every asset will be transferred to community ownership, managed by the people who actually live here, not distant corporations." The legal documents were signed on a simple folding table, the same one from Evelyn's kitchen, now a sacred object of community memory. Mrs. Chen, Pastor Rodriguez, and other neighborhood leaders took their places as the trust's first board members. "But this isn't charity," James continued. "It's restoration. Recognition that true wealth isn't built on exploitation, but on community, not on destruction, but on preservation of what matters most." Emily stepped forward then, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. "My mother's taught me that family isn't just blood. It's choice, it's love. It's standing together when the world tries to tear you apart. This neighborhood, all of you, you're my family too. You protected me, helped raise me, kept me safe until truth could triumph." The crowd's response was immediate and emotional. People who had lost homes, jobs, loved ones to corporate greed found themselves receiving keys to permanently affordable housing. Small business owners learned their leases were now perpetual, their rents controlled by their own community board. But the most powerful moment came when James unveiled the clinic's new mission statement, written in both English and Spanish. "No one dies for lack of care. No truth stays buried. No child grows up unloved." Sandra Chen's cameras captured it all for her documentary's final episode. The story of Thompson Heights had become a blueprint for communities nationwide fighting corporate exploitation. Victoria Chang, now retired and volunteering at the clinic's senior program, watched with tear-filled eyes as her former empire transformed into something meaningful. "We thought we were building a legacy of wealth," she told the cameras. "But these people, Evelyn, Isabel, Emily, they taught us that true legacy is measured in lives touched, truths protected, love freely given." The ceremony concluded with a tree planting. 2 saplings, a cherry tree for Isabel, a maple for Evelyn, their branches destined to grow together, providing shade for future generations. As the crowd dispersed, Emily knelt between the small trees, placing her mother's photographs at their bases. "They would have loved this," she said softly. "Both of them, seeing justice done, but with healing, not just punishment." James joined her, noticing how spring sunlight caught his daughter's face, highlighting features from both her mother's, Isabel's determination, Evelyn's compassion. "The hardest part," he admitted, "wasn't losing my wealth. It was realizing how much I'd already lost through blindness. Years I could have known you, watched you grow, learned from Evelyn's example. But you're learning now, Emily smiled. That's what Mom, both of them would have wanted. Growth, change, redemption. Officer Martinez approached, carrying files. More evidence had been discovered, more conspirators identified. The work of justice continued. But looking at the growing trees, at the clinic serving all regardless of ability to pay, at the community rising stronger from its trials, they knew the most important work was already bearing fruit. The price of redemption had been high. But as father and daughter left the plaza hand in hand, passing neighbors who now owned their own homes, children playing safely in rebuilt parks, elderly residents receiving care in the clinic named for their mothers, they knew every cost had been worth paying. Justice had been served, not just through courts and sentences, but through transformation and restoration. They had paid the price of truth with everything they had, and received in return something far more valuable: the chance to build something real, something true, something worthy of the mothers who had died protecting not just a child, but the very idea that love and truth matter more than power and profit. Spring sunshine blessed Thompson Heights, promising new growth, new hope, new possibilities. Just as Isabel and Evelyn would have wanted. Just as their daughter was helping create. One truth, one life, one act of love at a time. 1 year later, snow fell gently on Thompson Heights. But unlike the bitter storms of the past, this winter brought a different kind of magic to the transformed neighborhood. The community center, once Evelyn's modest apartment, buzzed with activity as children gathered for the first annual Isabel and Evelyn Memorial Scholarship announcements. Emily, now 11, stood at the podium with quiet confidence. My mother's believed education was the key to breaking cycles of poverty, she began. Today we honor their legacy by ensuring no child's dreams are limited by their circumstances. James watched from the back, his heart full. Gone were the expensive suits and corporate trappings. He wore a simple sweater Mrs. Chen had knitted him, his hands rough from community garden work. The former CEO had found purpose in simpler things, teaching business classes at the center, mentoring young entrepreneurs, learning the true meaning of wealth. 20 full scholarships were awarded that day, funded by the trust. But more importantly, each recipient was paired with a community mentor, creating bonds that went beyond mere financial support. This is what Mother meant, Emily told him later as they walked home through the snowy streets, when she said true wealth isn't in bank accounts, it's in connections, in helping others grow. The small apartment above the clinic felt warm and lived in now. Photos of both Isabel and Evelyn watched over their dinner table. Emily's art covered the walls, not just her own work, but pieces from her youth art program that helped children process trauma through creativity. The transformation of Thompson Heights had become a model studied nationwide. The community trust structure was being replicated in other cities. The clinic's sliding scale system had revolutionized local healthcare access. Crime rates had plummeted as residents gained ownership and pride in their neighborhood. Small businesses thrived under community-controlled development. But the most profound changes were personal. Sandra Chen's documentary had sparked a national conversation about corporate responsibility. Laws were being rewritten, oversight strengthened, communities empowered. Victoria Chang, in her final months, had completed a memoir exposing the inner workings of corporate corruption. Her dying wish was for it to be used as a teaching tool in business schools so future leaders learn that profit without principle is merely theft. Pastor Rodriguez's church had become an interfaith center for social justice, where business leaders regularly came to learn from community members about ethical development. Even Scott Vager's story served a purpose, a cautionary tale taught in ethics classes about the true cost of greed. That evening, as snow continued falling, Emily and James visited their usual spots, the memorial trees growing strong together, the clinic serving late patients, Mrs. Chen's bodega turned community hub. "Do you still miss them?" James asked softly. "Every day," Emily replied. "But I see them everywhere. In every life we help change. In every truth we protect. In every bit of love we put back into the world." They ended their walk at the small cemetery where Evelyn rested. Isabel's memorial marker had been placed beside her two mothers united in death as they had been separated in life. Emily placed fresh flowers, then pulled out Evelyn's last unopened letter saved for this moment. Together they read, "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, the truth has finally won. Remember that justice without compassion is merely revenge, that wealth without generosity is only greed, that family is not defined by blood but by love. Your mother Isabel died protecting the truth. I lived protecting you. Now it's your turn to protect something bigger than yourself, the possibility that love and truth matter more than power and profit. You have your mother's courage, and I hope some of my compassion. Use both wisely. Change the world not through force, but through love. Not through destruction, but through building something better. And know that wherever you go, whatever you do, two mothers are watching over you, proud of the woman you're becoming. All my love. Mom?" As they walked home through the gentle snow, Thompson Heights glowed with warmth and life. Children played in safe streets. Elderly residents chatted on well-maintained stoops. Families gathered in homes they now owned. The price of redemption had been high, but standing in their small kitchen, making hot chocolate the way Evelyn taught them, father and daughter knew they'd gained something priceless. A chance to prove that love was stronger than greed. That truth could triumph over power. That one community's transformation could spark a revolution of hearts. Spring would come again to Thompson Heights, and with it new growth, new hope, new possibilities. Just as two mothers had dreamed. Just as their daughter was helping create. Just as a father had finally learned to value. The price had been paid. The truth had won. Love had triumphed. And in that triumph, they found the greatest wealth of all. A legacy of truth, justice, and love that would outlive them all. The end. Just as Emily discovered that truth and love can transform lives, your simple actions can help spread powerful stories like this one. If this tale of redemption touched your heart, please consider subscribing to join our storytelling family. Hit the like button to help others find this story, and share it with those who might need its message of hope and healing. What touched you most about James and Emily's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, let's build a community that believes in second chances and the power of love to change lives.